You've done it 100 times. Your computer slows down, so you close a few tabs to free up memory, and you don't think twice about it. But have you ever wondered what that memory actually is? Why a thumb drive that holds your entire photo library costs pocket change, while the RAM inside your computer costs many times more for a fraction of the space? They both store data. They are not remotely the same thing. One just holds your files. The other is the working mind of the machine, read and rewritten billions of times per second. And it's so brutally hard to make that roughly 95% of the world's supply comes from just 3 companies. 2 you've barely thought about. 1 you've probably never heard of. Right now, every AI on Earth runs on those same chips. Every word an AI generates is pulled from that memory, billions of times per second. 3 companies, that's it. Remove them, and every AI model on Earth goes silent. So who really controls artificial intelligence? The answer changes everything we think we know about memory, money, and power. Let's start with the companies themselves, because their origins are the last thing you'd expect. You'd assume the firms holding up the AI revolution were born in gleaming labs with government backing and infinite money. They weren't. In 1978, in Boise, Idaho, a handful of engineers started a chip design company in the basement of a dentist's office. To survive, they took money from a local billionaire named J.R. Simplot, a potato farmer, the man whose potatoes became McDonald's French fries. That basement company was Micron. Today, it's the only American company left standing in the memory business, and its chips sit inside data centers, cars, and probably the laptop on your desk. 5 years later, in February 1983, the founder of a Korean conglomerate that had started life trading groceries and dried fish announced, against almost all outside advice, that his company would enter the memory chip business. That company was Samsung. Within a decade, it was the largest memory maker on the planet, and it held that crown for over 30 years. And the third? Founded in 1983 as the electronics arm of Hyundai, the car maker. By 2002, it was on the verge of bankruptcy, so broken that it was nearly sold off to Micron for parts. It was rescued, renamed, and in 2012 bought by the SK Group. That near corpse is SK Hynix. Hold that name, because it's about to matter more than almost any company you can think of. Here's the reframe. These weren't destined giants. These were desperate gambles. A dentist's basement, a grocery trader, a bankruptcy case. And between them, they quietly took over the one component every computer on Earth requires. For 40 years, that takeover stayed invisible because memory was boring. The workhorse product is called DRAM. That's just the industry's name for the RAM in your computer. The fast working memory that holds whatever you're doing right now and forgets it all the second the power goes off. A commodity, interchangeable, like flour or fuel. Prices boomed and crashed, and nobody outside the industry cared. But then something changed. And it changed because of a problem you've never heard of, sitting at the heart of every AI system you use. It's called the memory wall. Here's the mechanism. An AI chip, like the GPUs NVIDIA sells, is astonishingly fast at math. But it can only compute as fast as data can be fed into it. And the data, the model itself, lives in memory. If the memory is too slow, the world's most expensive processor just sits there, starving, waiting. The answer was a strange, radical design called high bandwidth memory, HBM. It's still DRAM at heart, but rebuilt for one job, feeding an AI chip at impossible speed. Instead of laying the memory chips flat, you stack them, up to 12 dies high, like a microscopic apartment tower, drilled through with thousands of vertical connections, each one thinner than a human hair. One defect anywhere in the stack, and the whole unit is garbage. For years, HBM looked like a niche curiosity. And this is where the story turns. Because during a brutal industry downturn, when memory prices were collapsing, SK Hynix, the former bankruptcy case, kept pouring money into HBM anyway. The giant, Samsung, treated it as a side project. Then, ChatGPT happened. And every AI model on Earth suddenly needed exactly the thing SK Hynix had spent a decade learning to build. The scoreboard flipped in a way nobody alive in this industry had ever seen. In April 2025, the research firm Counterpoint reported that SK Hynix had taken 36% of the global DRAM market and overtaken Samsung, the first time Samsung had lost the top spot since 1992. By mid-2025, Counterpoint had SK Hynix at over 60% of the entire HBM market, supplying NVIDIA directly. And in January 2026, the final confirmation, SK Hynix posted 47.2 trillion won in annual operating profit, beating Samsung for the first time in history. Think about the scale of what these three companies now feed. In October 2025, OpenAI signed agreements with Samsung and SK Hynix for its Stargate project, with demand projected to reach 900,000 memory wafers every month. A wafer is the dinner plate-sized disk of silicon that chips are printed on and cut from. Hundreds of chips per disk. According to TrendForce, that single project could consume around 40% of the world's entire DRAM output. One customer. 40% of a global industry. This wasn't a component anymore. This was the bottleneck. The thing that decides how big AI models can get and how fast they can think. NVIDIA gets the headlines, but NVIDIA's chips are useless without the memory stack beside them. And when three companies control the bottleneck of the most important technology on Earth, governments notice. Which brings us to the third part of this story, the part where memory stopped being business and became a weapon. Start with a date, October 7th, 2022. The United States unveiled sweeping export controls designed to cut China off from advanced chips and the equipment to make them. It was one of the most aggressive economic moves of the century. China's counterpunch landed on the memory industry. On May 21, 2023, the Cyberspace Administration of China announced that Micron, the company from the dentist's basement, had failed a national cybersecurity review and ordered operators of China's critical infrastructure to stop buying its products. Micron became the first company ever publicly failed under that review. No specific security flaw was ever detailed. It didn't need to be. Everyone understood the message. Then, the pressure turned on the Korean giants. Both companies run enormous factories inside China. Samsung makes NAND flash in Xi'an. NAND is the other kind of memory, the slow, permanent kind that keeps your files when the power is off. It's what's inside that cheap thumb drive from the beginning of this story, and inside your phone storage. SK Hynix makes DRAM in Wuxi. In September 2025, Washington revoked the waivers that let those factories freely receive American chipmaking equipment. Since the start of 2026, they operate on licenses renewed 1 year at a time. Every year, permission to run some of the world's most important factories can simply be withheld. And here's the texture detail that tells you where this ends. China is building its own champion, a DRAM maker called CXMT, precisely so it never has to depend on the big three again. Memory is now something nations refuse to live without controlling. That's not how countries treat components. That's how they treat oil. Meanwhile, the squeeze reaches you. With 3 suppliers, a geopolitical standoff, and AI buyers signing multi-year contracts for everything the fabs can produce, prices have gone vertical. TrendForce tracked conventional DRAM contract prices rising as much as 55 to 60% in a single quarter in early 2026. One standard DDR4 memory chip that cost around $2.60 in mid-2025 was selling for about $21 by June 2026, roughly 8 times the price in a single year. Goldman Sachs called it the most severe memory shortage in 15 years. And SK Hynix's chairman has warned that global supply could run about 20% below demand through 2030. The results are almost absurd. Samsung has projected an operating profit of roughly 89.4 trillion won for a single quarter of 2026, around $59 billion, nearly 19 times higher than a year earlier. And on July 10, 2026, SK Hynix, the company once too broke to stay alive, listed shares on Nasdaq in a deal expected to raise around $28 billion, one of the largest listings on record. This isn't a trade dispute. This is a resource war, and memory is the resource. So here's the part that lands on you. That laptop upgrade that suddenly cost more, the new phone with less RAM than you expected, the graphics card that never seems to come down in price. We call it inflation or a chip shortage, and we treat it like bad luck. But what if it isn't bad luck at all? What if it's the AI industry quietly outbidding you? Every gigabyte in your next phone is a gigabyte a data center wanted more. For the first time in your life, you are competing with artificial intelligence for the same physical resource. And you're losing. Remember the number we started with? Around 95% of the world's memory from 3 companies. A gamble funded by a potato farmer in a dentist's basement. A grocery trader's company that ruled for 30 years. A bankruptcy case that bet on a strange stacked chip nobody wanted and ended up holding the keys to artificial intelligence. 2 superpowers now fight over their factories. The biggest AI labs on Earth line up for their wafers. Entire national strategies bend around what these 3 companies can produce. So the next time your computer slows down and you close a few tabs to free up some memory, remember what you're actually touching. The most fought over resource on the planet, hiding in plain sight, 1 keystroke away. 3 companies, and most of us never even knew their names.